Welcome to the only show bringing cops and the community together for some real talk and some real listening. This is uncut. This is uncensored. This is Black and Blue Live. Welcome to Black and Blue Live, everybody. How you doing? My name is Dale. I'm the host. Thank you for joining me here today. I got a real special topic I want to talk about today. You know, homelessness is a really big problem in our nation, and we want to talk to some people that are out there on the front lines helping out with that. So again, thank you. Before we get into that, I want to thank everybody for joining me here on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Periscope. Your comments and questions are welcome, so be sure to send those in. My first guest, she is a social worker. She works for an outreach program here in LA. Her name is Marion Sanders. Everybody help me welcome her in. Here we go. How you doing, Marion?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
So I'm Marion. Yeah.
What was that?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. All right. And our next guest is a small business owner. She's got some experience in the homeless world. Everybody, please help me welcome in Miss Renee Clark. Where's she at? There she is. Renee, how you doing?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm good. How are you?
Excellent. All right. And our last guest here, he is a police officer out here in Southern California. He also works in the homeless section of Los Angeles. Everybody help me welcome in Mr. Dion Joseph. What's going on, my man?
Hey, I'm still above ground and amongst the living, so it must be good.
Yes. Every day that we could do that is a blessed day.
Yes, sir.
Yes. All right. So again, we're live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Periscope. So we can get a couple comments in here. Producer Liz, I think we got one in the queue already. Let's see if we got that. Yes. Jermaine Pace, she said he or she, I'm not sure what that says. I love you, Marion.
That's my little brother. I'm sorry.
That's your
Hi, little brother.
Everybody can show you love. Everybody show love here today. Everybody, please. So everyone else, please send in your comments and questions. I want to give everybody here an idea of what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about homelessness, how that impacts our society here in the U.S., amongst other things we got going on. Before we get into that, I want to send out my condolences to the family of my man who played the Black Panther there. He just died the other day. And Chadwick Boseman, we were all just talking about that off air, and that's really sad that he went through that, and nobody knew about it. His family knew about it, but it's nobody else's business but he and his family. And I want to send my condolences out to him. That was a really powerful. I'm a comic book geek, and I love that movie. Black Panther, as everybody else did. So I want to send my condolences out for that. Mm-hmm. All right, So homelessness, that's a big issue here in LA and all over. Marion, why don't you tell everybody what you do and how you help out with the homelessness?
Well, I'm Marion Sanders. I'm the Associate Director for Homeless Systems Integration at the Homeless Outreach Program Integrated Care System. We go by HOPIX. We're a nonprofit organization in South Los Angeles, and we serve people in various ways. One of the largest ways we serve people is through homeless and housing services. We do a lot of work with mental health and substance use. We do a lot of work with the reentry population, meaning folks exiting jails and prisons. We have a heavy focus on trauma as well. And so we service South Los Angeles, Linwood, Compton, and Paramount, where there's the second highest rate of homelessness right behind the Skid Row area. So that's what we do.
All right. And speaking of Skid Row, my man Dion, why don't you tell everybody about you and what you do?
Well, I'm a senior lead officer in the Skid Row area in the Los Angeles area. I've been working there for 23 years of my 25-year career in patrol, undercover, and now as the lead officer in charge of trying to help improve quality of life and safety for the people. It's been an honor. I've housed about 150 homeless people, but that was the 150 homeless people who were ready for the housing. The others, I've been trying to create an environment conducive to that change, and it's been difficult. I've started mentor programs for kids in Skid Row, empowered women through educating them and empowering them about their rights regarding domestic violence and sexual abuse. and pass out hygiene kits to the homeless with information on how to get on their feet. I try to offset that 3-day rule. When I see a new face, if they don't get help in the next 3 days, they're usually stuck there for the rest of their life. So I want to get resources to them as fast as I can. So that's pretty much what I do in a nutshell, and fight crime like nobody's business. But that's been incredibly challenging now. But that's about it.
Yeah, that's a story for another day there. And we'll talk about that. Renee, what do you do? What is your experience with homelessness? I know you're a small business owner, correct?
Correct. So I have a online boutique called Phoenix 33, but I'm also in a college police academy right now. So I'm going through that. I've been in that for 2 weeks. I know, right? But I was homeless on and off. I can't really. Yeah, it's already pretty hard, but I don't think there's anything that I cannot do. So I'm going forward with it. But I think the homeless journey, it kind of started after I was in some type of domestic violence situation. So from there, I think, everything just spiraled, and, before I knew it, I didn't have a place to live, and I was living in and out of different motels, or, with friends and family. And that went on for a while. Sometimes I didn't really want to believe that I was homeless, and I was just kind of like transitioning, but it became reality when I was there for homeless, pretty much without actual place to stay, for like a year. I think the last time was around 2017.
Wow. Yeah. And how'd you get out of that cycle there?
Well, first I think it starts mentally. You have to want to get out. You have to, I think it's different phases, that you go through when you're homeless. And for me, it was never financially, because I always had income. I already had a degree. I always kept a really nice job, but I don't. I think not only was it mental, but my kids got me through. I have kids, and how people perceive them and how people perceive you. It's kind of important when you're raising, kids. I didn't want them to go through teasing. I didn't want them to be looked different or to be judged. So it was my will. I had to get out of this situation. I had to do something better, and I just had to, for them, not for me. So I think it was for me. I just got tired of it. You hop around a lot. You're kind of, unstable. You're always somewhere. And then, I think you have to create like a facade. If you don't want people to really know what you're going to do. I'm kind of a strong person, but I'm also what's the word I want to use? I'm proud, so I didn't want to really ask for help. I didn't want people to know that I was going through, although they knew, they didn't know how far I was in. I got really comfortable saying, I can live this life, and long as I have the money, it's okay, because you can't tell I'm homeless, and you don't really know I'm homeless, because by looking at me, you didn't know. I had a life to, or an image to protect, right? So I got comfortable. I didn't really have to pay rent, but long as, my 2-bedroom studio, hotel room had 2 beds and a kitchenette, everything was all good. So at a point I wanted to be stable. My kids started to get older. So they were like, hey, how come we can't have our own room, or, how come my friends can't come over, kind of thing. So, at a point it was just like, okay, well, let's do this for them. And then I started to seek help. I went through, I think it was the county, I went through their homeless little program they have. I called 211, and, I think for me it's because I didn't know who could help me with this. I didn't know what resources was available, because this is kind of foreign, I didn't know where to go. So, I had started to receive Medi-Cal. I had started to receive Medi-Cal at some point. And then, I told my worker, like, I really don't have a, place to stay. I'm not really stable. And she's like, well, are you homeless? And I'm kind of like, I didn't know if this would get my children taken. So I was kind of like walking on eggshells. So she was like, no, just, you're going to be fine, but we're going to help you. So I was like, oh, you guys have help for this. I started to learn more about what they're offering, what they're able to do. And then I was like, well, if you can help me, then I'm going to take the help pretty much. Right. So at that point, she gave me some listings. I had to, she called to one, she put me in some type of special homeless database that they may have. And, before you know it, she gave me like money for a voucher. She gave me, a lot of things that I didn't have to pay for out of pocket. And I was like, wow, this, may be a little beneficial. So I ended up going to a place called the Weingart Center. It's in Los Angeles. And, I had to sit there all day pretty much and go through like an interview. I had a caseworker, and then they ended up finding me a shelter. So I ended up going to a shelter that was in Los Angeles as well. And, we had a bedroom, we shared it. And at that shelter, although they didn't do anything for me because I already had a job. So I guess that kind of gave me a leg up because I was actually doing something. But they gave me a place to stay. So I had a place to stay. There was laundry, there was everything there. And I actually didn't have to pay anything out of pocket to stay there either. It's pretty much save your money, do what you can, and, get back on your feet. You have this amount of time. So I ended up staying there for, I don't know, maybe a year or a few months. It didn't really work out. It just was not the environment I wanted my kids in. Yep. So I ended up getting called back for Section 8. So Section 8, at some point, I guess they worked with the county. Something happened to the point where, because I was homeless, I was able to get on their Section 8, the Los Angeles County Section 8 list. After that, I went to my little interview, and next thing you know, I'm on Section 8. So that was kind of the blessing I saw. The blessing in disguise was kind of following the program and, getting the help, because I don't think, had I not been in that database or gotten into a shelter, that I would have not still been homeless to this day. So I got Section 8, and from there, everything has been pretty good. I've been stable. Again, I've always had an employment. And in 2018, I started my boutique, Phoenix 33. And then I went back to school, got my AS degree in criminal justice. And, here I am today, in the police academy. So.
All right.
Great. That's fantastic.
That's an awesome story. That's great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. And another, we saw that one already. Producer Liz, another comment here from Facebook. We want to make sure you get those on. Anthony Thomas says you do such great work, Marion. So we'll definitely get into that, Marion. So I wanted to talk about, because Renee, you talked about children. So how this affects children. Do you see children coming through your agency a lot there, Marion?
Oh, yes, that absolutely. In South LA, we basically de facto, we're the largest provider of temporary housing for families. We have nearly 2,000 children that we serve ongoingly. And we serve we're roughly around 600 families that we're putting up in what you guys call shelter. We call temporary housing or crisis housing right now. There are a lot of children, predominantly African American, that we are serving in our programs. Absolutely, children.
Yeah. And I know you see children on a daily, Dion. You see them much down there at Skid Row?
Yes, we have children in Skid Row. They stay at a wonderful program called the Union Rescue Mission that takes them in off the streets. So you won't see a lot of children in the streets or in the tents. That's a myth that a lot of people like to put out there. But if a family does end up in the streets, usually people direct them to me and I get them into shelter, or I call the president of the mission and he goes out there and looks for them and brings them in. We do all we can not to allow children to be in the streets and exposed to some of the most horrific things that any human being can see. But and it's still tough. That's not the answer. A shelter is not the answer. I think even they'll admit that, being in Skid Row is not good, but it's the best we can do for now. And they're a wonderful organization. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Renee, you were talking about, you were working, you had a job, and at least, you had that for you, but it was still tough. You were in a shelter and you had to, get your kids through that. So I'm sure that was really tough on them. Yeah.
You know what? Actually, my kids took it really great. I really have some awesome kids because,
How old are they?
they're
How old are they?
my daughter is now 14 and my son is 10. So they were a lot younger when this happened, but they are so brave. They I give them, like all the highest acclimates because they like took it like a champ. They didn't complain. They were not scared. They just dealt with it. To them it was like a vacation. They're like, oh, we're in Orange County today. We can go to the beach, or we're in this place. They're like, oh, this is a nice vacation room, mom. A lot of people are not afforded the ability to, have a decent, hotel room. You kind of got to take what you can get. And I wasn't, that at that level yet. I was able to, say, hey, let's go, do something nice. I really just didn't want them to be affected by it. Right.
Yeah.
So, even to this day, we talk about, they were like, Mom, those are some of the funnest days that we had. We went to the beach. We were everywhere. And and I'm just like, wow, I still try to talk and, but honestly, they don't even remember a lot of it. They remember some of the people, maybe from the shelter, like, oh, this lady was really nice to us, but, I don't think they really felt the struggle. They didn't really feel, everything we went through. And that's pretty much by the grace of God,
Yeah. And that's a testament to you. That's a testament to you as well, Yeah. And kids are resilient. Another comment from King Bimi. He's an officer here in Southern California as well. He says, Officer Dion, tap in with Covenant House. They're an awesome resource for young men and women who are homeless or need resources such as finding jobs, alternate education, and they're faith-based. They'd love to have your support.
That's fantastic. Well, you have my support. Anybody wanting to help teenagers, we don't have a lot of teenagers who come to Skid Row to be homeless. A lot of them come with their family, but places like Hollywood, you're going to have a lot of that. I think that's a fantastic resource. But if we ever do run into that, it's nice to know that you guys are available, and I definitely will be contacting you.
Yeah, absolutely. Another comment here from Eve Pate. Hi, Marion. You are a blessing to many, and that love for others will be what you need. All right. And you got a whole fan club here, Renee Pate.
Right.
Bless you all for the work you're doing. Marion's mom. Okay. All right. And Lakita Suggs also says, Renee, what makes you think that they were not afraid? Just the change from a stable home to a shelter seems overwhelming.
Well, I'm a very vocal person. I really talk to my children. I want to know what they're afraid of, if they're hurting. I try to keep open dialogue with them, so we are each other's kind of like safety net in a way. So I talked to them. I asked them, like, are you guys scared? There was no point where they were alone to feel frightened. They were when we're inside the room, we're inside the room as a family. We're playing games, we're creating, our own environment, so I don't think they had an opportunity to be scared. And plus, I still have family, they just didn't know everything that was going on. So they would go play with their cousin. They led a normal life. Sometimes we may have to get on a bus and take 3 buses, but it was an adventure. I try to create everything like an adventure, like, oh, we're going to go on the bus and, sightsee today, or, we're going to do a treasure hunt. I think, again, I wanted to protect them from what we're going through, just in case someone asked them a question, then to make them fearful. So it was overwhelming for me, but for them, they're children, at the time, their ages, they just thought everything was fun. They didn't see, I had to struggle sometimes to get food, or, if it became too much, they had to go spend a night at their aunt's house and I had to sleep wherever I had to sleep. They didn't really see that part. They just saw what I created for them, the bubble that they were in. So it was overwhelming because I did it on and off for so long, but they didn't see that.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really interesting perspective, because oftentimes, and children display trauma, because I believe homelessness is trauma in real time. You don't see it. People don't view it that way because it's not a gunshot wound, so you don't see the bleeding physically. However, the trauma and the impact is internal and it's ongoing. And but children, just like just like they say, victims of domestic violence, the children are the silent victims.
Right.
Oftentimes with homelessness, they display their struggle and the impact to them in different ways. You might see them acting up in school. You might see them getting in fights. You might see them more depressed. And, male children and female children, they're the way that they behave when they're experiencing depression is absolutely different. Girls, they go inward. Males, they're more angry and aggressive. So I'm glad that your children didn't have that experience, but so many children are impacted by homelessness.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Well,
I agree.
Go ahead, Dion.
Well, you remind me of just so many incredible parents who do everything they can to shield their children from the pain. I know they're going to see some things. I know this incredible mother, her name's Amithia. I won't give her last name. And what she did was she created a family for her child. It was weird. She found me. She found a firefighter. She found all these people that while her child was in Skid Row, that she could be like father figures or older brothers to her. And on top of that, just like Miriam, she would take her kid to acting auditions, dance class. She did everything she could. And I'm telling you, every time I saw this kid, she was just happy and still is the most happy-go-lucky kid that you'll ever want to see. And that's just a credit to parenting. Your parenting is outstanding, and you are my hero. I appreciate your story. I love it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that one thing that I can offer as, because my biological mother, you've seen her in the comments, she said Marion's mom. She's my biological mother. I have my mother that raised me as well, who made a comment. And but my biological mother, she was drug addicted on Skid Row multiple times, even during the course of when I was doing this work. And the impact to me was so strong, I didn't feel it at the time because we were disconnected. It caused my siblings and I to be adopted. Although we were adopted by relatives, we weren't with our biological nuclear family. And the impact to me, I still feel it today. Although I've gone through a significant amount of healing, and I was raised with family and etc. But internally, that was still very, very traumatizing. So sometimes you don't have it, you don't display it immediately, but the impact is there. It is really about what you surround your children with and what type of elements of resiliency they're able to tap into to be able to get them through to the other side. So right. I want to make sure that we don't miss the fact that they are impacted. They'll display it in different ways at different times in their lives.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I believe that.
So another comment before we move on from Lakita Suggs. At Marion, one of the smartest people I know. Can you speak on resiliency as it relates to the process of homelessness?
Wow. Okay. So that's one of my good friends, and resiliency and homelessness. I think that oftentimes that we just kind of identify people by their issue. So we say homeless people. So the issue is that they're homeless, instead of separating the problem from the person and calling them people experiencing homelessness. And often within the past couple of weeks, I had to phone my biological mother and tell her that I appreciated every single thing that she went through because of what she had to go through to just live and survive, just being homeless. And one of the things that that was so powerful and healing for me, because I didn't realize the strength that it takes for someone to be able to survive living on the street without four walls around them. Just imagine what they have to go through and what they have to tap into just to live. And so we oftentimes don't look at that fact. We don't look at them from a strength-based perspective. And we, in the homeless world, in social services and social work, we always strength-based perspective. But there's a number of different biases and all of those other things that precede our ability to really see people for who they are outside of their problem. And so when we truly identify somebody by their strengths, Renee, you had the ability to take your children, wrap them around, seek resources, go out. Those are huge strengths. We often identify people by their deficits. And so once we start to look at people, ourselves included, by our strengths and tap into those things, that's when we become resilient. That's how we're able to get over. And the same thing applies to people experiencing homelessness. And I think that there are more, I think they're stronger than a whole lot of people to be able to survive that type of life with the trauma, with the violence, with the substance use, and all of those things that they had to do to get through that traumatic period in their life. Those are some of the most strongest people I know.
Yeah, and you don't hear, and that, just to back her up, you don't see a lot of suicides on Skid Row, and that's just to back up what she's saying. And I've walked with these people, I work with these people. It's not to say that they don't have trauma, but they are some of the strongest, most resilient individuals you'll ever want to meet. So I back that statement up 100%.
All right. Another comment on Facebook. Vivi V says, Officer Dion, what's the toughest part of working on Skid Row, emotional and physical?
Okay, emotionally for me as an African-American is seeing the majority of the population being African-American. And I know why that is. I know how that happened. But to really go above and beyond to try to help them is really a challenge because they have a lot riding against them. Things like NIMBYism, not in my backyard. When you talk about opening up housing and shelters and programs outside of Skid Row, you have the NIMBYs, I call them. They believe that they don't want to see homeless. They don't want to help people because they have this stereotypical mindset about homelessness. That breaks my heart when I've been calling for this to decentralize services. But when I say decentralized services in Skid Row, I don't mean shut down the services in Skid Row. I just mean I don't want to see another one built there. I believe that we as a state, we all should be able to share the wealth in trying to help the homeless in a responsible way. But a lot of people's stigma about homelessness, oh, we don't want to help them. They're African-American, they're crack addicts, they're all the stuff like that. That's heartbreaking to me. Physically, by the grace of God, I haven't been sick in the 23 years I've been down there. Unfortunately, we have things like hepatitis, the coronavirus. Thank God that hasn't had an impact there. We've had tuberculosis, Hep A, we've had typhus, and all these horrible things that people are going through. And I don't stay in the station. When these things happen, those people still need me. I go out there and walk with them. I talk with them. I still hug them. I'll never forget, there was a lady who was 86 years old and she had scabies and she was covered from head to toe in scabies. And I tried to call her son to pick her up, and her son said, yeah, I'll go get her. And he never came. A week later, I see her and she's still there. So I tried to call one of the many services to come talk to her, and they wouldn't help her. So finally, I was on a day off, and a friend of mine from a great organization called me and said, Dion, this lady you've been telling me about, she's out here, but she won't go. She won't go to the program unless you're here. Now, I was at home in my Superman underwear watching TV, right, and drinking a smoothie, right. That was my day off. I got dressed and I drove all the way down to Skid Row on my day off, and when she saw me, she finally went in. So, and she was taken into a hospital and eventually later housed. But it's just the heartbreak can take a toll on me mentally, and it does take a toll on me physically because I give so much that I stop taking care of myself sometimes. So yeah, it's an emotional thing, but it's a calling, and when you have a calling on your life, you fight through it because there's people that need us.
Yep. But also, Dion, you got to remember, though, just like, when they tell you on a plane, if you're traveling with a kid and, the plane starts going down and those oxygen masks come down, what do they tell you? Put yours on first, because if you not help, you can't help anyone else. So remember that. You got to
that's something I have to learn. That's something I have to learn. And I haven't done that in 23 years, but I'm starting to realize that I do have to start breathing a little bit before it takes over your life and affects your family. Yes.
Absolutely. All right, I want to bring up that anyone see that old movie with Will Smith, Pursuit of Happiness?
Yes.
That was a real heartbreaking movie where he was homeless, but he was resilient, and he was, trying to. He actually is based off a true story of a stockbroker. He took an internship while he was homeless. I want to play a little clip of that real quick, and we'll get your thoughts on that when we come back. Check this out.
Here it is. Here's a cave. Come on. Right here. Go. Hurry.
Are we safe? there were some major differences between reality and the film. Now, in the film, they have to do things a certain way. Jaden Smith plays my son as a 5-year-old. My son was 14 months old.
Okay.
That changes everything. He was still in diapers.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And there was a scene in the film that takes place in the bathroom. And Will and his son create this alternative universe and play this game about being cavemen. We need to find a cave, someplace to spend the night. I had a game I played with my son, and the game was real simple. The game was called Shh. And that meant that no matter what anybody said on the other side of that door, no matter how hard they pound on the door, we're not here. We're invisible. Right. And the hardest thing I had to do every day, childcare. And you think about that. When you've got young children, next to your rent or your mortgage, the biggest expense you got every month is what? Childcare. That was the hardest thing I had to do every day. And to leave my little boy with somebody I did not know and hope everything was okay. Man, that tore me to pieces every day.
What do you guys think about that? I mean, Renee, you lived it, right?
Can you guys hear me? Because I can't hear you guys.
Yeah, we can hear you now. We can hear you. All right. At any rate, we'll come back to you, Renee, if you can hear us. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that clip there. But Marion, why don't you talk about that clip right there? You know, fathers and mothers being resilient and still having to go out and do what they got to do for their kids so they can get out of that situation.
I mean, we see it all the time in the work that we do. We have families living in cars, parks, underneath freeways, in places what we call not meant for human habitation. We see it all the time. We have some very resilient folks that are able to tap into a number of different resources to be able to just survive. That clip where the parent is Will Smith is staying up and holding a child in the arms. I mean, that's a real reality that we're faced with every single day. Although, you know, and I want to step back just a little bit because we haven't really painted the landscape of what homelessness actually looks like. And from the vantage point of LA County, we're talking about 66,000 people experiencing homelessness every single day, 75% of which are literally homeless on the street. Of that population, about 12,000 of them are families that are experiencing homelessness. And if we want to paint it in terms of ethnicity, Black folks are overwhelmingly represented in that population. You think about LA County, we represent 8% of the population, and we're nearly 40% of people experiencing homelessness. This is a very real thing for families, for individuals within our particular community. I see it every single day. We operate what's called the Family Solution Center, the Hopix Family Solution Center that's located in Spa 6. And we have we are the most impacted region of families experiencing homelessness walking through our doors every single day. And they're coming there because they don't have any other option. They've already exhausted all of their resources. And one thing that has to be said over and over and over again, outside of the fact that homelessness is trauma in real time, it's also you become homeless because you've lost all of your support networks. You have nowhere else to go. You have nothing else to tap into. Oftentimes we know from our community, we have folks that are homeless right around the corner from their parents' house or a relative's house because they've already exhausted they've exhausted their length of stay. And so in the Black community specifically, and Dion was saying this earlier, and I thought it was a great point. And I say it all the time. We have so many different things that are against us. Earlier, I likened it to, and I was having a conversation with one of my friends. I likened it to like when you go to the batting cages and you're trying to practice batting, and you have that little gun that shoots out all the balls. That's what the experiences and barriers are like for people of color, families that are experiencing homelessness in our community. That's what it's like. It's you think about the social determinants of health. and the factors that contribute to homelessness. You're talking about economic factors, you're talking about educational factors, you're talking about access to resources that will help you be able to just cover your basic needs. We can't cover our basic needs. And so this is what our families and people experiencing homelessness are dealing with ongoingly, coupled with the fact that racism, that's just like sound the alarm on that.
Sure.
And it's because if you think about all of the external factors contributing to homelessness ongoingly, it's because of the external factors that are contributing. Policies that are designed to systemically keep us homeless, keep us separate. You think about in the United States alone, we're what, 13% of the population?
Right.
13% of the population, and our numbers in terms of how we're overrepresented in homelessness. I can bring it down towards just LA County, just make it smaller. 10 million people are in LA County. We're 8% of the population. That's 800,000 people. If I round up and say how many Black people are experiencing homelessness, if I round up to 40%, that's 320,000 Black people of the 800,000. We don't represent a large portion of the population, but we're overrepresented in the number of people experiencing homelessness. You have to think about that. That is like an assault on Black people of color, Black people specifically. So what that clip that you showed is very real. That was a man trying to take care of his family. He came up on a situation where he couldn't get ahead. He was trying, and oftentimes when we think about homeless people, we're like, oh, I'm sorry, people experiencing homelessness, we're like, oh, they don't want help. That's not true. Every single day, people are walking into the doors of HOPICS and other local nonprofits and service providers that are working. They are trying. People, I think it was last year where I seen more people, my colleagues in the profession that I'm in, social services and homeless services, walk through the door. I had seen them. I sat across from them on in situations like this, in meetings, etc. Come across them, and they were walking through the door seeking help. So we need to look at this a little bit differently. That clip is very profound in the fact that it is real life. It might be, Hollywood, whatever, but that's literally real life for a lot of folks. When you're sleeping in a park with your children, that's real life.
Right. And also, there are different stages, different people experiencing homelessness. We've got, the person like in the clip there, or like Renee, looks like we lost her for a little bit. But we've also got mentally ill people, right? The veterans, drug addicted people, alcohol addicted people, young people that are coming here for, like you mentioned earlier, Dion, going to Hollywood thinking they're going to, become movie stars, what have you, and they end up homeless. There's different levels of it. I'm sure you could speak to that as well, but go ahead. You had something to say, Dion? Yeah,
on the family, what angers me more than anything is whenever we talk about housing the homeless, they only focus on single resident occupancy. And I don't understand why there's not a sense of urgency to build low-income supportive housing for families, because we have so many families who are smushed together in a shelter or in an off-site facility, but nobody is building family units. And that to me is one of the biggest crimes, because like I said, the things that I've seen children exposed to in Skid Row, there should be a sense of urgency to create that, not in Skid Row, but in places where the families, it's more positive, it's safer, where the families can begin to thrive. And that's what I wanted to add on to that. I don't understand the logic of having all these billions of dollars being sent into tackling the issue of homelessness, but not focusing on families who, like Marion said, are trying. These aren't crack addicts. These aren't people who are going to burn your city down. They're not going to bring your property value down. They just want a hand up, not a handout. And for us not to give it to them as a state, city, or county, or whatever city in the state, I think is a great disservice to all of us. Yeah, absolutely. But going back to my point there, what amount of people do you experience that are, not just of those people that are trying to get a leg up, but are, again,
that don't want the help, that are out there trying to live that lifestyle, that are addicted to some sort of substance, that are mentally ill? What
There,
sort of breakdowns in the
there's
population is that?
there's a high level. In the area, and I can only talk about Skid Row. We have about 15,000 people, and everybody in Skid Row is not a crack addict. Everybody in Skid Row is not mentally ill, but we do have a large percentage. I would say estimate about 65% of the population struggles with some form of mental illness, but they're varied. So when I say mental illness, don't think
Mhm.
everybody's running around with one sock and a hospital bound on. That's not true. There are people who actually manage their illnesses. They take their medication and they function. They're high functioning. But as far as drug addiction, you have about 2/3 of the Skid Row population in the street and even in the shelters and low-income supportive programs with wraparound services who are either recovering addicts or are addicts. And for the people on the street, the biggest factor in them not getting the services that they need or not desiring them is the narcotics that they're taking every
Yeah.
day. And I know this because I've tried to house. There's 2,000 people who sleep on the streets of Skid Row, and for about 10 years, everybody knew if you needed a leg up on housing, go to Officer Joseph, and Joseph will plead your case, and you'll get a leg up, you'll get housing. Out of that 10 years, only 150 came to me to be housed, and out of that 150, half of those, after 2 days inside the facilities, walked out of their housing unit. And because they didn't like the rules, I can't bring my crack, I can't bring my drug dealer in here, I can't bring my loan shark in here. So there's another reality. Like, I agree 100% with what Miriam is saying. I just don't believe there's a universal brush to fix homelessness when it's such a layered issue. Mental illness. I'm angry about mental illness and how we have failed the mentally ill in this country because America's solution to helping the mentally ill is in the 1970s, let's close down the asylums, which I agree they were inhumane, but I don't believe in throwing out the baby with the bathwater. But let's close down the asylums, sprinkle them with pills in the name of civil liberties, kick them out. And what happened was a lot of those individuals did fall into the loving arms of family members who tried to help them, but a large contingent of them didn't. They either got pushed in, shoved in, or wandered into places like Skid Row, and their initial problem was paranoid schizophrenia, bipolar, and that was it. We can
Mhm.
handle that. But when they come to places like Skid Row, they stop taking their prescribed medication because it makes them feel lethargic and catatonic. And in Skid Row, you got to be ready for anything. So they throw away or sell their medication, and they end up self-medicating on the hard stuff like crack cocaine, methamphetamine, especially if they have no support, no loved ones. And that's when they become a police problem. I always tell people, we already know this, that being paranoid schizophrenic is not a crime. Being depressed is not a crime. Being all these things are not crimes. But when those things meet drug addiction, it can have disastrous consequences, not only for themselves, because many times they threaten to commit suicide or actually demonstrate that they would, but also it's disastrous for the public as well, because I've seen people who are struggling with mental illness hurt, kill, stab people. And I'm telling you, as a police officer, that is not their fault. That is a systemic failure at a level. And for me, being working there 23 years, I have my suggestions. I don't claim to have all the answers, but based on the dual diagnosis theory, if you're dealing with somebody who's dual diagnosis who just tried to run in front of an MTA bus, the answer is not a 72-hour hold or less. That fails them. Matter of fact, they're not even staying 72 hours. What happens is
Mhm.
they check on them in 6 hours. How you feeling? Sprinkle, sprinkle. They lie and say they feel great, and then they go back out, and the cycle continues. It should never be. If we're really serious about helping these individuals without robbing them of their civil liberties, it should be 6 weeks. And here's why. You have to detox them first, because if you don't detox them, they'll just tell you whatever you want to hear just to get out of there, and the cycle's going to continue. Then you got to medicate them, because on average, a lot of people would take 6 to 8 weeks for their medication to actually take hold and for them to benefit from the therapeutic effects from the medication to actually stabilize them. And then while you're doing that, the experts who I love and I respect, you develop that rapport, but on another level, so they could find their family members and connect them instead of just releasing them without connecting them to loved ones. But on a whole nother level, and this is where I'm talking to our politicians and our legislators, we have to streamline the conservatorship process. It's really heartbreaking for me. I'll give you one example. Two ladies came from Baltimore to find their young son, and he's grown, but he was out. He was out there. When I say he was dual diagnosis, he's the picture of it. And I was finally able to rescue him and get him into a facility. And when I called them, I said, "Your son's in the hospital. He's supposed to be there for 72 hours. Get here as fast as you can." They were out here they called the next plane. When they got there to the hospital, their son had been released least. And then 2 weeks later, he had been stabbed to death in the streets. So these are the tragedies that happen in our nation when we don't really take a hard look at how to solve these crises. And it's really heartbreaking. We have to do a better job because as a police officer, I don't want to be the tip of the spear for these problems. I know I have to be because there's no other solutions, I think we do a pretty good job, especially in Skid Row, with the amount of individual suffering that we have. We do a really good job of not having to get into major uses of forces or shootings with them. I'm proud of my fellow officers for that. But at the end of the day, I don't believe that it's right that we should be the first contact for a lot of these individuals when they graduate to a state of crisis.
Yeah.
So I wanted to add something to what Deanna is saying. So the 2020 point crime count, the homeless count came out, and it gives you a bunch of different statistics. And for LA County, with regards to substance use, of the 66,000 people that are experiencing homelessness, 27% of them are experiencing substance use disorder, and 25% are experiencing mental health illness, and then 41% have co-occurring issues. And so when you look at it from that perspective, you're dealing with a fraction of the population who's very sick. And one of the things that I want to shy away from is identifying that, oh, they have substance use, they're crackheads, or they're crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that just disregards who they are as people. But one of the things that we don't do enough of is figure out why. What happened to them that would cause them to cope in that manner, meaning substance use? Why are they picking up drugs, right? Mentally ill. Some things are genetic. Some things are as a result of a trauma, right? Depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, all of those things. We have to start thinking about people with utilizing what's called universal precaution. What happened to them, not necessarily what is wrong with them. And I think that's how the system continues to fail the people who are experiencing homelessness, is because we're not looking, we're identifying them by their issue and not by who they are as people and what their story is, because their story is so important to who they are and why they're facing what they're facing right now in this very moment. And that's absolutely critical to the work that we do every single day.
Yeah.
Right. And that's one of the things that I've been trying to do for 23 years, find out who they are. I know many of them by a first name basis. For some of them, I'm the only person where they won't even listen to mental health clinicians. I'm the only person that they listen to because I've established a rapport with them, because I see them as human first. And the primary reason is obviously my upbringing. We raised foster children. My niece, I had a nephew who's mentally ill. So I kind of already know kind of how to do that. But you got to find their humanity first. But the key is, in order to find out who they are, we have to find a way to get them in a safe place where we can do that.
Absolutely.
And that's very difficult to do when they're in places like Skid Row, where, the temptation to fail is just so great. And you may have them one day say, hey, I got a place for you, man. Come on here, meet me. Joseph, okay, I'll meet you. And then they walk 2 blocks away from you and the dope man gives them some meth or spice. And then you can't find them the next day when you've already set up for them to get housing or help through PATH or through, LASA or other organizations. So that's the challenge. It's many challenges.
I agree with that. I think also what we have to note, and I want to bring the issue of race again, is predominantly people experiencing homelessness are single Black men.
Yes.
And if it were turned, if we were thinking about if this were white men that were experiencing this, it wouldn't be happening. All of the systemic things that are occurring right now would not be allowed to persist ongoingly. And so we have to shine a light on the racist and racism that exists systemically that's causing this cyclical issue of homelessness. And then also we're not really viewing homelessness as a public health crisis like we should be viewing. COVID-19 came in, it's a public health crisis, as it should be. But homelessness has been going on, and it's been on the rise for a long time. If you look at the trends, you look at the data, it rose in LA County 13% total. In areas where there's a high concentration of people of color, it's rising even more. So we have to take a look at that in its full totality to be able to really see it for what it is. Why is this existing the way that it's existing?
I totally agree. A lot of it, some of it is racism. A lot of it is classism. What I'm noticing in Skid Row, and this is boots on the ground, I'm seeing a demographic shift. Where Skid Row is probably primarily 75% African American, I'm noticing more European, Caucasian, I don't even know what to call anybody, or Caucasian folks coming in, more Hispanics, and even I'm starting to see some Asians. And why, and I'm finding out why, is that other locations like Orange County, who their homeless were predominantly white, you know, they are solving their homeless issue by saying they're solving it, but shoving it downtown. I'm finding I've talked to people from Boston, from Cleveland, and these folks, white folks, they come down here. They're terrified when they get to Skid Row. They hang around the station all day until we can get them connected. But it's more or less classism, because I don't see anybody in a rush to help. Do you guys remember the story on Skid River in Orange County, Skid River, where the homeless kind of took over behind Angel Stadium? A lot of those down there in Anaheim. A lot of those individuals were white, and nobody was in a rush to help them. So I don't disagree with you that there's systemic racism. I don't disagree, but what it sounds like to me, or what it feels like from the boots on the ground, it looks like classism. I don't want to help them because they're homeless, they're poor, they're addicts. And when people hear that, it sounds like they don't care what color they are. It's just they just have a problem, and they don't see their humanity. Yeah.
Let's get a couple more comments in here there, Producer Liz. From Jennifer Young on YouTube. She says, Dion, I would also encourage one to explore what is the why, what has happened to them. Trauma and generalization trauma is woven in the picture that is described.
Absolutely. For a lot of them, because I'm like family, I know what happened to them. I remember there's a gentleman who was a successful businessman who saw his daughter get shot with a 12-gauge shotgun in South LA. And his daughter was his world. And when he saw that, he couldn't get that out of his mind. So he tried to escape through alcoholism. It wasn't enough. So he graduated to crack cocaine, and he ended up on Skid Row. I know a woman who was raped multiple times as a child, and the way she escaped it, not just by her, but by outsiders, but also by family she trusted. So I know the stories of a lot of them. So I completely get what you're saying. Trauma does lead a lot of people to the row. And then there's also the other side of somebody who said, I was just at a party, I wanted to get higher, someone offered me this and I tried it, you know. So there's layers as to why a lot of people, but absolutely trauma is a key factor. And I know the whys for a lot of them. Before I put them in shelters or house them or try to help them, I really try to listen to their stories so I can try to guide them to the correct resource.
Yep. Another one on YouTube, Veronica Lewis says, homelessness is the most extreme manifestation of poverty. People of color are impoverished due to biased and oppressive policies across multiple systems. Kind of like what you were saying there, Marion. And like Dion said, we don't disagree with you, but we also see homelessness being part of classism as well. Because I was just reading some statistics, and you just mentioned it here a minute ago, Dion, that you're seeing a lot of Asians. I saw statistics saying that Pacific Islanders and Native Americans are a high percentage of the homeless population nationwide. So, yeah,
so I still got to go back to it. So you think about, you have to think about things in context. So, and I'm saying what I'm saying specific to African Americans because of how many African Americans there exist in the United States in LA County versus the overwhelming representation of them in the homeless population. It's data does not lie. It's straightforward. You can look at the raw data and do your own statistical analysis, add up 1, 2, 3, 4, and it will always lead back to there are more African Americans experiencing homelessness than we're overrepresented than any other group of people, period. So in LA County, there's 10 million people, 10 million. 800,000 of them are African American. 320,000 of those 800,000 are experiencing homelessness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we don't disagree at all. I 100% agree with you. So there's no argument there. It's just I grew up in the 1980s. You know, it was one of the most dangerous times to be African American, and that's when crack kind of took over our neighborhoods and communities. You know, they always say when America catches a cold, Black community catches a flu, and crack cocaine was a flu that completely decimated our communities, and that's why. And I'm speaking Skid Row specific. You know,
Right.
I believe in data. You know, but you know, sometimes there's a story behind the numbers that doesn't get calculated into that puts things in a better context. And so, you know, crack cocaine. When I first came to Skid Row in 1997, I was looking at the fallout of crack cocaine. See, in inner city communities where a lot of, I hate the term minority because there's nothing minor about us as a people, but
Right.
for lack of a better term, for a lot of minorities in those communities like South LA, Compton, Watts, Inglewood, East Side, Long Beach, and places like that, a lot of African Americans were already on the lower end of the socioeconomic totem pole. So socioeconomic ladder, so to speak. I apologize. Socioeconomic ladder. So when they experienced crack addiction and when crack ran through their communities, they didn't have very far to fall. Matter of fact, the next rung was poverty and homelessness, and they got burned out, kicked out of their communities, ran out of their communities or whatever, or came to places like Skid Row because there's shelters there. Now, what's the difference between them and their more affluent counterparts? Look, crack affected white folks too, but the problem was, or more affluent people who are readily financially off, the problem is they had a buffer to keep them from falling that far. So when I see Skid Row, when I first came, I look at that as a fallout of the 1980s and how crack cocaine did decimate our communities, and that might be one of the catalysts for why the populace is mostly African American, or that large percentage. A part of the reason, not the only reason. But I totally agree with you. I don't disagree. It's just I'm touching it in a way that on many levels that a lot of people don't understand or don't see. Yeah, but I agree with you. I don't disagree.
Absolutely.
I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. A few more comments in here. Lakita also says, Officer Dion, how do you educate your colleagues on seeing homelessness people as human?
Well, the good news is where I work, I can't speak for every police officer, and I won't. Okay, where I work, most of the officers do. Many of those officers, Skid Row is one of the most dangerous places to work, just environmentally. I'm not just talking about guns, knives, stabbing, and violence. Environmentally, no one in their right mind, they used to call me crazy, would actually want to work Skid Row. And you have officers who've been working there for 5, 10, 15 years, and they're on a first name basis with many people in the community. So a lot of them already do. But I'm not going to say there aren't those who don't and that haven't, that I've had to pull to a side and say, hey, you know, that's a human being, you know, but that's a select few. I call them the negative exception. And usually that sets them straight, or they get put in a transfer and leave. But for the most part, they do. I think we have to stop buying into the broad brush stereotypes of any group, whether it be African Americans, police officers, because if you ever drove down Skid Row and you would see the relationship the officers have, we're not stormtroopers down here, you know, trying to make people's lives miserable. They're just trying to do a difficult job based on systemic failure. See, police officers, our job, unfortunately, now is to deal where the systemic failures are with everything, whether it be mental health, whether it be with handling poverty, whether it be with whatever. It ends up at our front door, and we have to be the tip of the spear, so to speak, to try to mitigate that. And I think that's wrong. I think every police officer will tell you that that's wrong. And unfortunately, when negative incidents happen, you know, we get blamed because we are the tangible arm of the government. We're the form of government that you can actually touch and see. So we get the brunt of that. But I can assure you, you know, if I worked in a place where they mistreated the homeless, I wouldn't be there. I really commend the men and women that work there, not just the police, but also the fire department. You talk about a challenging job. All the first responders there have a tough job to do, and they do it pretty well. I'm not saying we're perfect.
Yeah. And that's one thing I wanted to talk about too, you know, recognizing them as human beings. Want to bring up here, we can take that comment down here for a second there, producer Liz. You know, a lot are mentally ill down there on Skid Row and other places, but to see them as human, to talk to them is one thing that they appreciate and that they need as well, because they are human. I don't know if you guys remember this movie here, The Soloist, with
Yep.
Jamie Foxx and Robert Downey Jr. This is based on a true story with Nathaniel Ayers and Steve Lopez. Mr. Lopez was a reporter with the New York Times, and he stumbled
know both
upon
of them.
Nathaniel down there. Yeah. And they struck up a friendship because, Nathaniel had a problem with paranoid schizophrenia, and Mr. Lopez treated him as human and brought him to his house and met his family and all that type of stuff. So if we could just treat them as human beings, not just us as police officers, but everybody, everyone walking down the street can see them as human beings, that's the first place we could start.
A lot of people don't want to do the work of tearing down the walls that are guarding someone's heart so you can reach it. I've just been fortunate to been able to have that gift through my parents of just really being patient. Many people I met who I befriend or became like family with in Skid Row, we started out, they hated my guts. They literally, I show up, I'm the devil, F you, house Negro, whoop, 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 all that. And after about 6 months to a year, they watch how I work, or they come to me for help and they see how I go to hell and back to try to help them and reach out to them, and they start changing their perception. So I see them as human first. I see, hey, I know why you're angry, because of your trauma and because of this and that or whatever happened to you. I get it, but I'm a patient man. I'm going to work through, I'm going to break through. And then once I break through, they end up seeing me as human, and I end up getting name changes. And what I mean by, when I first came to Skid Row, my name was RoboCop. Uncle Tom, this and that, Sambo, all this. That was in the 90s, right? But as people started to see my heart and they started to see who I was, those names became funny names like Male Stripper and stuff like that, Officer Bobblehead. But now,
wait a minute, male stripper.
Oh yeah,
this is a family show. This is a family show. Don't do
Don't let
anything
me
like that here.
My arms are kind of big, so it makes my uniform kind of tight. So they think it's about the rain, right? But then now, over the last 15 years, those names have changed to Uncle, Goddaddy, Angel, and my favorite is when they call me Dion, because that means I'm family. So this is real stuff. And if you don't believe it, obviously you could let your fingers do the walk and go to Google or YouTube, and you could see that this is not made up. But I also want to assure people that I'm not the only one. I'm the only one that's vocal, because I'm tired of the homeless being exploited and misrepresented. And I just want to tell the truth about homelessness so we can solve it from a truth-based foundation, and not one that's laced with hatred or demagoguery or anything else, or too overly political. If we just look at it from a truth-based foundation, we can solve this issue.
All right. Just to remind everybody here before we get out here in a little bit that we are live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Periscope. If we can get a couple more comments on here before we get out here. Daniel Marmaleo on Facebook saying, outstanding dialogue as Dion and Marion continue. Outstanding work to make a difference. And great job of the host of Black and Blue. Thank you there, Mr. Marmaleo. Any other comments there? We got Imani on YouTube saying, I lost my uncle in the streets of LA, and eventually the Skid Row had to look his name up and information to find out he died in 2010. We found that out in 2013. So
I'm so sorry. I'm so
his
sorry.
Kids had to find out the hard way, the same way.
And that happens so much. It's just really sad when I have to break the news to a loved one who's been looking for their son or daughter or uncle or father, that their loved one was found dead in a porta potty with a needle in their arm. And, before I move forward, I just want to talk to Miriam. I want to tell you how much I respect what you're doing. I think you're a hero, and you're one of the unsung heroes. You don't have a badge and a gun, but you do your job to help people. And I think that's incredible. And I just want to say I commend you for all that you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. And as we get out of here, I wanted to ask you, both of you, starting with you, Marion, what can people do to help with this crisis?
So, wow, that's a good question. One of the things that folks can do is really look at people as people, not from their deficit, but from who they are as individuals. Another key thing that's important is to combat NIMBYism. Not in my backyard, and Dion spoke about this earlier, but it's so true. When we're trying to build permanent supportive housing in areas that folks don't want it in, it makes it harder for us to get people into housing. So we need your help to combat that. Another key thing that folks can do is the solution to homelessness is housing. And so one of the things that we're finding is that there in LA County, there is a 500,000 unit deficit of, just housing. And
Yeah.
so we need landlords, we need property owners to step up and offer up their property to house this population. Right now, Hopix is in the process of doing what's called a street to home project. And so basically what we identified 3 encampments in South LA, and we're going to take folks literally from the street straight into housing. Traditionally, there has been this notion that you have to take people to the shelter and then get them ready and then take them on to permanent housing, but you don't. And we've done this project before on a larger scale. And so we're going to be doing it again. There's a lot of funding coming down as a part of the COVID recovery plan. And then we're going to purpose those dollars for that. So if there's any landlords, property owners that have property that want to contribute to that effort and efforts just throughout LA County regarding trying to house people experiencing homelessness, please let us know. Also stemming the tide of racism. And I spoke about racism a lot. But one of the things that we have to do is understand homelessness from all angles in holistic perspective. But we need to we need to speak up and speak out when we see things that are racist, just in general, that's impacting people that are experiencing homelessness. We need to act and acknowledge those things and do things, including voting, to making sure that we have the right people in the right positions that's going to make the right type of policy to get us out of this. Because I truly believe that we're going to have to legislate ourselves out of homelessness. There was an ad hoc committee on Black people experiencing homelessness about two years ago, I think. And my director, she made a comment before, Veronica Lewis, she was all part of that committee. And they came up with 67 recommendations on how to assist Black people experiencing homelessness. And we need to push the county, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, and any other power that be, the council districts, the mayor, everybody, to implement some of those recommendations to make sure that we're able to transition and stem the tide of the overrepresentation of Black people in homelessness. And lastly, we need to, one thing I'm going to leave you with is we need to understand more about the people that are experiencing the trauma of homelessness. And some of them are me and you, the people that are doing the work. And so a lot of that starts with education and dialogue. September 1st, Hopix is hosting a conversation called This is Personal, and it's about the experiences of Black essential workers who've experienced trauma, who have dealt with issues of racism and also just at the hands of police officers. So we want to have those kind of conversations so that we can acknowledge and begin to heal. And so, those are all the things that I think that are important for people to do.
All right. Dion, what can people do to help?
Well, for me, the solutions are what I spoke of with mental illness. We need to stop. I think it's inhumane for us to believe that we can help somebody in 72 hours or less, or 2 weeks or less, through 5150 or 5152 WIC. I think that's inhumane to believe that based on what we know now and how bad things are now. Obviously, spreading for 72 hours to 6 weeks, shortening the conservatorship process, making it easier for families to help their loved ones and help them gain control of their lives. Also, I believe in decentralization. I talked about that. I don't want to see any programs in Skid Row close. I'm just tired of Skid Row being the mecca of all things homeless. And here's why. My statement when I began policing at Skid Row was, I'm going to create an environment conducive to change. One of the number one tenements of drug getting clean or recovery in the recovery communities, environment is everything. And if the drug dealer is not only outside your drug program, but also allowed to come in and take over your room and everything else, then I don't see how House First is effective when that housing program is inside one of the most dangerous places in the United States of America. You're just setting people up for failure. You're just housed, but still going through hell. I think we need to decentralize. We need other 88 cities in LA County alone. Why we can't get 10 cities to build housing there or emergency shelters or transitional housing. I don't understand why that is, but I think that would take a lot of burden off. And then last thing, like I said, is I have a problem with people who sell drugs near drug programs and shelters. And I know we're in the era where we're trying to decriminalize everything in the name of social justice, but I don't agree with that because I know drug dealers. I've talked to them. They don't care about their people. They don't care about anything. They just care about making money. And they're keeping your loved one on an endless spiral of addiction under the guise of, social justice, don't mess with me. Don't mess with me. I'm like, hey, I'm a victim. I'm a victim. They are not victims. I know these guys. They're preying on our brothers and sisters who are trying to get clean. And I think we should have strict laws against individuals and penalties for anybody who sells drugs within 1,000 feet of a drug program or a shelter or a domestic violence shelter or AA program. Right now, there's a guy who sells beer right in front of an Alcoholics Anonymous program in Skid Row, and he's been doing it for 15 years. And because he gets slapped on the wrist, there's no fear of consequence. So he keeps on doing it. And people who are in the AA meeting trying to do their 12 steps gets that 13th step when they step outside the door and get offered a tall boy, and that's wrong. Someone like that should be kept away from places. From recovery zones. And those are my solutions, and they have nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with someone's behavior and actions.
I agree. All right. It was a pretty good, stimulating conversation we had here today. Anthony Thomas on Facebook says incredible dialogue from the entire panel. I appreciate everybody for checking us out here on Facebook. And Shante Coleman says, vote, vote, vote. I agree. Coming up. Everybody, if you haven't registered, make sure you get registered to vote. I love the conversation, you two. It was real stimulating, and we got some ideas for solutions. It's gonna take a while. It's gonna take all of us working together to get through this, and hopefully we can. Everybody be safe. Put on your mask. And COVID's still out there, right? Don't think it's over yet. And remember the advice I gave you there earlier, Dion. Take care of yourself. Because if you don't, nobody else will. So, and again, Veronica Lewis on YouTube says, Dion, I appreciate hearing about your direct experiences and insights. It's a helpful perspective. All right.
And you guys can hit me up. You can hit me up on Twitter at Officer Dion Joseph and all that good stuff. Facebook. Yeah.
All right. So thank everybody for joining us here on Facebook today, YouTube, everything on Black and Blue Live. Check us out. The podcast drops tomorrow with Officer Aaron Thompson. He's with LA. I appreciate everybody for joining us here today, and we out.
This has been a Maitre D Entertainment presentation.